Roger Wakimoto. They did a multi-Doppler synthesis of this case. I think measured 95 meters per second, which is about 200 miles an hour in a subvortex. And dual Doppler data is really hard to reconstruct the small scale structure of tornadoes. But in that case, it's really successful at doing that. And the fact that you can see a 200 mile an hour wind from a dual Doppler in a really small scale feature is a really neat thing. So one of the work that Howie did with this case, you can see over here, we have on the left flank. So here, tornadoes moving from basically the bottom left corner to the top right corner. And most of the subvortices are forming on the left side of the tornado. And these subvortices rotate around. Most don't make it a full revolution or more. Most of them are making it about 3/4 of the way around or completing one revolution, and then they dissipate in this left flank. So you kind of come around and then dissipate. So this is a track of all the little subvortices that were occurring in the El Reno tornado. The green dots show where they formed, the red dots show where they dissipated. So you can see some of these didn't go very far at all. Others, basically make almost a full revolution. But 15, they looked at 24 subvortices. 15 of these only lasted for 15 seconds or less. So they're very, very short-lived. There were a couple that lasted for a minute or more. All right, so I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about other types of radar technology we've developed at OU. So one of these is the atmospheric imaging radar. This is a radar that was developed when I was a PhD student. I had a chance to help put the radar together. I did some simulations of the radar to understand the design of the system and simulate what it looked like with a tornado. And we took that radar out, collected some of our first observations with it. So the data, the way it operates is it transmits this really wide beam. So normally with the radar, you transmit a really narrow beam and you receive a really narrow beam. So with this radar, it transmits a really wide beam, and then it receives and forms multiple beams all the way from the ground upward through a column. So you can think of it kind of like you're using a camera. You use the flash to capture an image, and then you have a bunch of pixels on the back end, and those pixels are recreating a fine, detailed image. This radar works in a similar way. On the receive, you can see these panels that are up here. It's a little hard to see with the image, but there's 36 of them that are aligned vertically. So in a similar way to a digital camera, we can use those pixels or use the data collected with each of those receivers, similar to a pixel on a camera, to reconstruct what the image looks like in fine detail. So this radar, the advantage of this is by rotating through, we get this column of data. So in a span of about 5 seconds, we can get data throughout the entire storm, all the way from the bottom to the top. So it's about 30 to 60 times faster than NexRad, being able to look at tornadoes on the evolution of 5 seconds or so. So these are some images. This is one of the case where we looked at tornado dissipation with this radar. This is the Canadian-Texas tornado in 2015. Here's got a nice cone tornado, and we documented it through the dissipation phase of it. You can see here a tilted rope funnel during the dissipation. This is an animation. These are scans every 5 seconds. So one of the things, I'm showing just one tilt here through this tornado, but there are 20 other elevation angles being collected all at the same time as this. So you get a really nice view of what the vertical structure of the tornado looks like. So initially, it's this pretty wide diameter tornado. Loop back around here. See a wide diameter tornado, even some subvortices. And then over a period of just a couple minutes, it basically is vanishing. It kind of curls to the west and then back toward the south. Storm motion was practically negligible in this case. So looking at the rotational strength of the tornado, want to first point out at the beginning stage of when this tornado is weakening, the first place where we see weakening is about the altitude of the low-level mesocyclone. So it's about a little bit under a mile above the ground. So you see a weakening happening here first, and then that weakening happens in kind of a downward fashion. but also kind of simultaneously in upward fashion through the mesocyclone. Another thing that's interesting is coincident with this weakening is happening downward is a downward broadening of the vortex. So instead, you can imagine with a tornado when it's forming, it's contracting. Usually that's happening with some kind of strong updraft. Here, if you had a weakening updraft, that might act to increase the diameter of the tornado and reduce the angular or reduce the velocities. So if it's kind of expanding, you would expect the winds to start weakening. So we see this with this downward broadening toward the ground. So if you look at the image, this is what the tornado looks like right around here when it's fairly intense, a wide cone tornado. Actually undergoes some kind of periodic intensification weakening prior to the tornado dissipating. Then we have this rope tornado here that's toward this later stage. So then as the tornado is beginning to weaken, it weakens the fastest in the lowest 500 meters. Compared to what's happening just above that. So that's roughly what's about coincident with this time of the image shown here. And then finally, when the tornado completely weakens, you can see it's primarily happening almost simultaneously, but maybe starting at the ground, moving upwards. So that'd be consistent if the tornado was dissipating first right at the ground. You have some vertical vorticity is going to keep going up. So that's going to slowly dissipate pretty rapidly upward in some upward fashion. All right, so now I'm going to talk about the data we collected in 2025. This is not the Morton tornado, but the data we collected just prior to that. I'll talk about the Morton tornado in depth. But you can see really nice hook echo, pretty nice area of hail right here. But you can see this minimum in reflectivity, a little weak echo hole in the center of the tornado. Coincident with that, pretty strong rotation evident here as well. So we had kind of many different objectives with our field campaign, but one of the things that we did was we wanted to team up with the National Severe Storms Lab and the Texas Tech teams to collect data to do multi-sensor analysis. So we deployed with other sensors like Doppler LiDARs, radiosondes, mobile mesonettes, a whole bunch of different instruments, even hail cameras, which are really cool, rapid, or they capture the fall behavior of hail with really high resolution imagery. So I mentioned a few of the tornadoes and talked that we scanned, Matador, Arnett, the Morton tornado, and a tornado near Lubbock, Texas on June 5th. Scanned a few other tornadoes. There's a QLCS tornado merger in Norman that we also got some data on. So this data from the Matador, Texas tornado. This is a EF2 tornado. This is the reflectivity here on the top. So you can see as the tornado intensifies, you get this hook echo that wraps around, formation of a weak reflectivity eye inside of that. And then we also see the intensification of the velocities. Right around here is kind of a first step change right around 7:05 p.m. And then around the time of the tornado report, there's a second intensification about where the tornado gets quite a bit wider, which is when tornado kind of basically took on a pretty wide cone appearance. So we are kind of curious. Tornado report was at 15 minutes after the hour. If you all have any evidence of tornado before that, we'd certainly be interested to know that, since it was right around the threshold for most of our tornado measurements, or what we'd expect for a tornado about 10 minutes before the report. The other thing, this tornado produced a ton of giant hail. It had 5 reports that were bigger than 4 inches in diameter in a span of about 30 minutes. So you can see in some of the dual pole fields evidence of this hail signature. So for hail, we'll often look at the correlation coefficient. You can see that here with these really low values, basically spanning the whole forward flank downdraft. So that's evidence of some really large hail that's falling out in the forward flank downdraft, even as the storm is beginning to produce a tornado. So there's a lot of thoughts about hail, where once storm starts producing a tornado, the hail begins to hail production stops, or there's a reduction in hail that happens after that. Here, this storm just keeps producing very large hail. So here we're looking close to the ground. Now we're gonna look a little bit higher up in the storm at the mid levels. And I wanna draw your attention to the reflectivity signature. So it's gonna loop back around here in just a second. So we have this nice hook echo that's evident even at mid levels, but you can see these little pulses of high reflectivity. It's kind of conveyor belt of high reflectivity going in, which is helping to provide a lot of the embryos and a lot of the hail development that's occurring in the mid-level updraft. But right at the time of tornado genesis, you do see that little band of reflectivity basically get a move into the forward flank and disappear. Another thing that's interesting, signature that's common with tornadoes is looking at the strength of the updraft. One of the ways we do that with dual pole is a signature called the ZDR column. So in the updraft, you get raindrops that are lofted above the environmental freezing level. You can see that here with the ZDR. These kind of yellow and red values indicate raindrops that are present above the freezing level. And after the tornado forms, you get this kind of broad expanse of high ZDR that has kind of a circular nature to it. But prior to that, some of the tornado genesis literature in looking at the signature says you typically see a really wide ZDR column. That's not something we see in this case. So we think it's probably masked by all this hail that's present in the updraft. So it's something, a caveat we have to look at for using that signature for predicting tornado formation. RHV, you can also see just these low values. So the low values aloft are indications where you have some of the largest hail, especially areas when you get aloft, you have a lot of wet hail growth, and that'll really drop the correlation values. So you can see that some of these kind of curved bands of very low RHV indicating hail development around the mesocyclone, then advecting over into the forward flank downdraft. So next, talk about the Arnett tornado. So here you can see a really nice debris ball and reflectivity, really tight rotational couplet associated with that. This is a really narrow diameter tornado. So with an X-band radar, a 1 degree beam, it's usually pretty fine resolution. We're pretty close. We're maybe 2 miles away from it. But it's even with how close we are, we maybe have 6 to 8 samples across the tornado vortex signature. So we measured wind speeds, and on the order of about 110, 120 miles an hour. But the tornado is rated EF3, so we'd expect wind speeds from the radar to be a little bit higher. But there's some issues with the sampling because of the size of the beam with just how narrow that tornado is. If you look, you also see a RHV signature here, drop in correlation coefficient associated with lofted debris. This tornado did loft considerable amount of debris. You can see here the debris cloud. This is a photograph from Howie where you can see this debris lofted up by the tornado. Beautiful tornado, really clear visibility. We also had Roger Wakimoto out in the field with us. That's him here doing photogrammetry studies. So he came out with us for about a period of 2 weeks, and we were grateful to have him along. We captured the late stages, EF3 tornado, and a subsequent EF0 tornado that formed. So I want to draw your attention to the velocity. So I'll let it loop back here in just a second. So as the tornado dissipates, you can see it move off to the north, and we get another tornado that forms to the southwest of it. So I talked earlier about tornadoes that form one right after the other. The most common way for that to happen, the original tornado goes off to the north. We do see that here. The new tornado forms to the southeast of it on the rear flank gust front. Here we see the new tornado form to the southwest of it. It's forming essentially in this area. We have a really strong rear flank downdraft surge coming in, a small scale low-level vortex that develops this new tornado that becomes part of the occluding low-level mesocyclone. So it is the storm as a whole, and the mesocyclone is dissipating and moving northward, but there was some handoff between this EF3 tornado that's occluding and dissipating and a new tornado that formed just to the rear of it to the west. So a little bit different process than what we've seen, but all happening on the order of a minute or less in terms of the cycle between the two tornadoes. And then the June 5th, 6 tornadoes. These were really impressive. This is an earlier tornado, about 5 o'clock. And then the Morton tornado, photos from Howie. You can see all the significant amounts of lofted dust and around a pretty wide diameter tornado. This is a velocity signature. We'll dive into a detailed look at that here in a second. But you can see the aliasing of the velocities where you have really intense winds. The velocity basically folds from inbounds to what looks like outbounds, but really it's this is something that will unfold later in software. So this is an animation of the Morton tornado here. You can see just how turbulent the inflow is. There's a lot of texture to the velocity. You can see that in some of the Otis videos, all this turbulent structure of the dust going into the tornado. So this tornado takes on this really turbulent appearance initially, and then when it kind of tightens up, the flow gets a little bit more laminar and smooth. So that's something we're looking in is kind of transitions between really turbulent tornado vortices and laminar flow and how that might influence the tornado. That's also coincident with a lot of precipitation beginning to kind of wrap in around the tornado around that same time. So there's some interesting things going on there. Also, going to talk about here in a second, we do see evidence of a horizontal vortex that's present as well. So looking at a little bit lower level scan, we have the yellow colors, those are outbound velocities. And then we have these green colors, which are inbound velocities. So just north of the tornado, we have this band of really strong convergence. And then immediately north of that, we have this band of divergence. So convergence means the air is coming together. So when it's right at the ground, it has to go up. When we have divergence, the flow is coming apart. So that means we have to have a downdraft to compensate for that. So that means we have some kind of horizontal vortex. Here's the upward part of it. And then the flow goes over that, comes back down right around here. So this is looking very close to the ground, maybe 70, 80 meters above the ground. This is looking a little bit higher, a few hundred meters. See, this flow is mostly positive, so indicating the winds are mostly going away from the radar. So that gives some indication of this rotor that's in the immediate vicinity of the tornado. So if you look at tornado videos, you often see these kind of horizontal tubes around really intense tornadoes. This here looks like one of the Doppler velocity signatures of a horizontal vortex in very close proximity to the tornado. Another thing, if you look at the detail here, you also see it's not all flow going away. You see some little undulations in the flow. So what we think's happening is this horizontal vortex has some undulations where we see some components of rotation, both about the vertical axis and a horizontal axis, with some of these little mini couplets that are evident. So this is an animation. So one of the things you can see is it's moving outward in time. So that horizontal vortex initially is very close to the tornado and then seems to push outward. So we're not sure if maybe it's related to some kind of boundary or other storm scale feature, something we're going to dive into in the near future. Some other interesting things, you can see some intense anticyclonic vortices. Should see when it comes back around right here, that also are moving kind of through the tornado vortex on the outer flow where there's strong anticyclonic rotation. All right, so some of the future research we're going to do with the RAXPOL data. One of the more interesting tornado genesis theories of late, that's primarily simulation-based, is a theory that we kind of have come to call vorticity worms, or they're really streaks of vertical vorticity. So when I say vertical vorticity, it's a little band of rotation oriented about a vertical axis. So here there's streaks of rotation oriented about a vertical axis. And they're confined to about the lowest 100 yards or meters above the ground. So these streaks are evident in the inflow in tornadoes. So you can see some of these in the model simulations here. They develop as they get close to the low level mesocyclone. They can intensify and get stretched and eventually become the tornado vortex, at least in simulations. So anytime you see something in simulations, you wonder, does it happen in real life? And that's what we plan to use some of the RAXPOL data. We document at least 6 cases of tornado genesis where we can take a look at that. And this is a pretty clear shift in the idea of how tornadoes form. So the traditional idea is that we have vorticity develops in the downdraft regions, the rear flank downdraft or the forward flank downdraft. Here, the argument that Paul Markowski is putting forth is that the vorticity that's eventually becoming the tornado vortex is coming from the inflow. and these really shallow streaks of rotation that then get ingested by the low-level mesocyclone. Some other future research, we are doing some work with the Doppler spectra, so it's a little bit more of a technical topic, but one of the problems you have when you have a tornado is you have debris that's present, and the debris don't move at the same speed as the air. So if you have really big debris, it really moves a lot slower than the air. It's also moving outward, so it'll mask the inflow that we see in tornadoes. One of my students developed a technique using the Doppler spectra. So at the radar, normally you see 1 pixel, and it says the velocity is basically this certain speed at that location. But really in that pixel, we can look at the diversity of the winds within that pixel. So we can use something called the Doppler spectra to look at the spread of wind speeds inside that radar gate. So that's what we're doing with this. I look and see if we can figure out where the debris is and where the rain is and take the debris out. So we only look at the rain. And the rain moves much more closely to what the wind speed is. So one of student Howie and I are co-advising, Mia is looking at this with Raxpol data. So looking forward, we have several future radar systems, and many of these are phased array radars. So talked about the atmospheric imaging radar. This on the bottom is the Horus radar. It has 1,024 antennas. So each of these little antennas, this is a phased array that's at S-band. So the same frequency as the NexRad radars in the United States. So it's being evaluated as basically a candidate technology that could be used in the future for an operational radar. The phased array, what it's doing is basically have all these antenna elements. And if you synchronize when they transmit, you can point a beam in different directions. And that's all done electronically. So you don't have to physically move it around. You just change the timing of the signals, and you can send a beam that goes over here, then one over here, then one over here. So you don't have to wait to physically move it around. So that allows you to do really rapid and adaptive scanning. So the Horus radar is shown over here. This is, again, an S-band radar. What's unique about this all-digital system is every antenna on there has all the electronics of a whole radar behind it. So we can change the signals that go into each of those individual transmitters. Each one can be unique. And that gives us some, particularly some advantages in terms of making accurate measurements and calibrating the system. All right, so we captured a case this year with Horus. This is a supercell and a QLCS merger. QLCSs are pretty poorly understood in general for tornado genesis, in part because the QLCS tornadoes form really rapidly. It's, supercell, you know where to target the mesocyclone. When you look along a QLCS, it's pretty hard to pick a point on the QLCS, target it, and collect observations with the mobile radar and have a pretty good idea you're going to get a mesovortex form and a tornado in that spot. But here we have a QLCS merger with a supercell. You can see the surge of precipitation that comes out, and that happens basically around the time of tornado genesis. But tornado genesis here happens, you can see the velocity couplet develop right here. That's happening right about the time when the QLCS is merging with the supercell. So we haven't dug into this radar data in a lot of detail yet, but we're going to look at this process of the QLCS supercell merger to look at how that merger process influences tornado genesis. You'd also see it rapidly surge out here. This low-level vortex gets pushed out really far ahead of the updraft, and it causes the tornado to be quite short-lived because it comes displaced from the updraft. Another phased array radar system we have under development is a pair of K-band phased arrays. This is funded by the National Science Foundation. So most of the phased array work we've done so far is with radar beams that are similar in size to Raxpol or larger. So most mobile radars like the Dows, the Raxpol have a beam that's about 1 degree. There are a few radars that have finer beams, like the Texas Tech K-band radars are 0.3 degree beam width. So what we want to do is take phased array technology and pair it with a radar frequency that would let us get much finer scales of motion. So we are developing a pair of K-band phased arrays. These have a beam width of 0.3 degrees. So we're able to see resolutions at about 5 kilometers in range or a few miles of about 25 meters across. So when you're talking about something like a tornado, that becomes really important. So for a tornado, most tornadoes are 100, 200 meters across. So if you want to see the fine detail, that tornado vortex signature, in most tornadoes, you need to have really fine spatial resolution. Also, these are really, the radars are going to be able to scan really quickly, so we can get a full volume scan in about 20 seconds. So we can deploy them also in multi-Doppler modes where we take the 2 radars out and we can do 3D wind constructions, so we can look at not just the wind toward and away, but we can look at the horizontal wind speeds and the vertical velocities. Also, there'll be dual polarization, so we can look at the types of precipitation as well as debris. I do want to note these radars are primarily funded to do kind of basic cloud and precipitation studies, so looking at things like cumulus cloud growth, storm initiation, but we are interested in doing some tornado research with them. So some potential science opportunities. I mentioned that most tornadoes are not that big, so it's really hard to get very fine spatial sampling. These are some numerical simulations we've done of tornadoes, and you can see some of the fine scale features that are evident in tornadoes. These are some low momentum streaks. Some of those have really intense vertical motions associated with them. They influence the character of the flow in the interior of the tornado. Also, you can see several fine scale tornado vortices. With tornadoes like El Reno, you can see subvortices pretty clearly. With most tornadoes, you can sometimes see them visually in tornado videos, but they're really hard to see in Doppler velocity data because they're such fine scale. With finer resolution measurements and rapid scans, we can learn more about the inner properties of tornadoes and that fine scale behavior. All right, so thank you, appreciate. I wanted to also mention that I do really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I've been really impressed meeting a lot of young students who are developing their own radar systems, doing really interesting work at the Otis project. There's some really exciting things going on technology-wise, and it's a really great community to be a part of. Okay, thank you. Yep.
Yeah, my question was, I hear you a couple of rumors around like research around June 5th, 4 p.m. to. All right. Oh, cool. I'll just yell really loud. But my question is surrounding. I've heard a couple. Oh, nice, it's working. Yay! But my question is, I've heard a few rumors here and there about research surrounding hail within the RFD region of the June 5th Morton tornado. I was curious if you had any information on that, because I was on that tornado and I personally observed how hail was almost launched horizontally out of that RFD. It was honestly incredible.
So I didn't include the dual pole data. I probably should have, but you do see this arc of very low correlation coefficient. So that's typically associated with hail or debris. You see it come around and wrap around the tornado. So it may very well be, I don't know if it's hail being centrifuged or just in the rear flank downdraft. One of the problems with using some of these polarimetric variables, debris can drop RHB and so can hail. So one of the things we're kind of curious about, you have all this lofted dust and debris going around the tornado, you have all this hail. So any imagery or video in the vicinity of the tornado might be really helpful to look at for that case. If you all have any, we'd love to take a look and chat with you all. So feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to discuss that.
Send that over whenever you feel fine.
Thank you. Thank you so much. On the Morton Rax-Pole horizontal vortice example, you mentioned that may be a result of a boundary interaction. Do you have more evidence or examples of that, or what's your analysis there for?
Right now, it's primarily speculation, primarily because this is a horizontal vortex that was wrapped. I mean, normally when you look at a video, you see it kind of just go up along the outside of the tornado, kind of a helical fashion. Here, it seems to move outward more than I would expect if it was just like a horizontal vortex rotating up and around. So it's mostly speculation at this point. but something I'll look into and see if there is any evidence of a boundary maybe moving through that created that rotor. Not 100% sure yet, but yeah, that's a great question.
How close is too close for good data quality and for personal safety?
So I mean, for good data quality, you want to be as close as possible. Some of the, for personal safety, I mean, I would say we typically aim to deploy 2 to 3 miles away. So it's kind of our sweet spot. So it's going to depend on what you want to look at. When you get really close, you see really close to the ground, which is really good for looking at wind speed measurements right near the surface, which is really important. But when we're trying to understand how tornadoes form, there's a lot that matters more than just what's at the ground. We also want to know what's going on at the low-level mesocyclone altitude, what's going on in the storm in general. So being a little bit farther away where we can scan up higher and see what's happening at the altitude of the mesocyclone, being too close can prevent you from getting really good data quality. It also, just with, just the evolution of tornadoes, it can rapidly widen, the track can change, even with a real-time display that's updating, we usually don't want to get closer than 2 to 3 kilometers or a couple miles.
Oh, we got a couple in the back here.
Yeah. Have you been in a place with any of these radars where you had to move quickly because the storm did something different than what was expected?
Yeah, I personally haven't been on a chase where like tornado motions changed enough to where we had to undeploy, but we've been in cases where especially like the storm just surges out with a lot of really fast, or the RFD surges out and you're just trying to get out of being in really strong winds and hail. So that tends to be, we can undeploy in 30 seconds. It's basically, we just have to stow the pedestal and we can shut the radar down on the road or all the electronic part of it.
You got one more back here.
Yeah. So my question is how common are these subvorts in tornadoes in general? And on the Greenfield, Iowa tornado a few years ago, where in the video you can clearly see some subvorts around it in the Dow scan. I'm just curious if the Dow scanned any subvorts that you could see on the radar.
We did not deploy with the Dows. I'd have to defer to CSWR folks on the Greenfield storm. But I mean, you very clearly saw subvortices. I mean, more broadly, I think they're more common than what we see on radar just because we don't resolve them well. But you see them in videos a lot. I think there's a lot still to be understood about how frequent they are. Like in numerical simulations, we see them all the time, even in smaller diameter tornadoes. So I would imagine they're pretty common.
Awesome. Yep. One more question back here.
All right. So on that last slide with the simulated radar, is that an estimate of your new Ka-band's like resolution, or is that just a simulation of what you're looking for?
So this is just a tornado simulation from a numerical model, so it doesn't have any radar coupled to it. With the K-band resolution, we would be able to get about 10 points between each of these little ticks. So we should be able to resolve some of those finer scale subvortices, or at least get a few observations across them. But we do have a position right now for a postdoc who's going to be doing work to simulate what the radar would actually see as opposed to just the model. Yeah.
Oh, one more. You got it?
Coming. Got this. Just a quick question for like the high school, middle school students in the crowd. Can you kind of explain how undergraduate and graduate students contribute or participate in this type of research? Like what it looks like for them?
So undergraduate students, we get involved in a variety of different ways. There's funded projects where they do a research project. They can take a look at a tornado case from the mobile radar data. We have undergraduate students who go out with us in the field and collect tornado observations. So they, and in some cases, like the students even have opportunities to publish those data sets and learn how to lead a study. And graduate school students, we have, I think, had 10 or 11 different graduate students come out with us this year in the field. So a lot of opportunities to go out and collect data on tornadoes. We take the radar out as much as we can, and then we bring that data back. We do there's a lot of data quality analysis that goes to get high quality, or to be able to really draw definitive conclusions about the data. So spend time doing that and then doing the analysis on that data and then try to publish the results from that.
All right. Any more questions? All right, give a good round of applause. Woo! Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks.
Come on, crew.
Really great stuff, right?
Yeah.
Who's awake right now?
Woo!
Yeah.
Who wants some more free things? Woo!
Always.
Okay, so we have amazing vendors here. Like, I'm beyond impressed with everyone that came out and all their free giveaways. So we want to highlight some of them just a little bit. So I'm going to hand over the mic, and we're going to have some fun.
How's it going, guys? So, good. So, quick introduction. My name is Andrew Worse. I own the Reaper Storm Chasers. I'm here with Team Dominator Storm Recovery. We got Casey Billings. We got Ginger. Come talk to us. Come meet us over at the booth. We're here to help out after a disaster hits. We want to help. We want to stay. We want to do cleanup. Come talk to us. We'll help you out. We got a free raffle going on. So come by the booth. It is free. Come sign up. Full go bag. Got everything from Reno, USA. They have helped us tremendously in Mississippi and all over. So come help us. Sign up for the free raffle. Get you some goodies.
Yeah, there's some good stuff in there, guys, too. I promise.
I love it. And now we're going to give these two away. So I'm trying to think of somewhat hard questions for you guys. So the question is for these, or actually we can do it separate. We'll do a shirt and that. Okay. So what is the circumference, don't Google it on your phone right now, of the largest hailstone? What is the circumference of the largest hailstone? Who raised their hand? There's one there, back there. Yes, you. Just shout it. 8.9. What? 8.9. No. I couldn't hear him. No, we're the circumference. We're looking for the circumference. No, but we're looking for the circumference, guys. Oh, the circumference. Come on, guys. I believe in you. Yes. Well, I've got 18.6, but this might be wrong. Just give it to him. Yes. Woo! I like it. Oh, yeah. I love it. Okay. Oh, do you guys have a question for you guys that you want to ask?
What was the first tornado that Reed ever saw and chased?
Ooh.
Back here again.
Oh, yeah. What was it? May 3rd, 99.
Boom.
Yes!
Got it.
You got it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Make sure to stop by. Their table is right out here on the right. And so, again, this is a free raffle. Make sure to register to win. So, yay. And I'm going to hand it off to you.
Yeah, awesome. Make sure you guys go visit all the vendors. Aren't our vendors awesome this year?
Yeah.
So many awesome vendors out there.
Woo!
All right, so I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker. I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Persoff. He's an associate professor of medicine at the University of Colorado and assistant medical director of emergency preparedness at UC Health. He's also a veteran storm chaser, and this is really cool, an award-winning snowflake photographer. I love his snowflake work so much. Known for blending science, medicine, and storytelling to explain extreme weather and crisis response. Everyone give a warm welcome to Dr. Persoff.
Good morning. That's almost good enough to get you going. All right, great. Oh, wow, here I am. There it is. So I love that, guys in the audience are like, what's the girth? But you guys all want to give the length. I don't know. It's a little, I'm not sure about that. But, hey, it's your conference. What am I going to do? All right, so a little bit about me. Who's this guy? Well, basically, I'm a husband, father, and believe it or not, an introvert. Many of you may have seen me at the conference and thought, God, why isn't that guy saying hi to me? We're friends on Facebook or on Twitter or whatever else. It's because I actually am an introvert. This is my family. This was at the Friendship Wall in Paris. And there's my wife and I in front of Castle Hohenzollern, which is in southeast Germany. If you've never been to the Bavarian area of Germany, I highly recommend it. I'm pretty smitten with my wife. But the other thing is I've been chasing for 36 years, and I am definitely not in the class of everyone else you've all heard or admired for years. I am definitely a lower tier chaser, and I mostly am, instead of having skill, I have perseverance. So my one claim to fame was this Campo photo from May 31st in 2010. Who was on that with me? I'm that freaking old. Okay, so that's fine. Don't worry about it. It's all good. This was it, and up until recently was a pretty good tornado photo. I used to be on the fire department up in Boulder, actually a rural fire protection district. That's me looking like Mario from Super Mario Brothers. You may remember me from this. And then I also have, I also do a hospitalist inpatient medicine and emergency preparedness. I helped out at Joplin, and from there on chose to change my career to focus on emergency preparedness. And then this is manifested in some pretty cool ways, including now I do a lot of DoD grants, which are focused on disaster recovery and preparedness. And this summer, we actually were able to convert part of a hotel into a hospital, a fully functioning hospital with ICU and med-surg rooms, which is a really exciting project. And should you actually want to download it, we have a manual on how you can do this. So you can take over any hotel. You could start tonight with this hotel. Just tell them I said it's fine, and you can do that. Mostly what people know me for, though, is the snowflakes. And that's because I absolutely love the snowflakes. I will tell you that this year has been a bit harsh. We've not had as many snowflakes as we want. And you're probably saying, well, what does that have to do with anything? And that's okay. I'm going to talk about chasing. We're going to talk about some important stuff today. But I want to talk about something that's really key, which is almost every single speaker here, except for our last one who had tremendous success, has talked about how they totally whiffed last year. And I am also in the whiff club. I managed to see lots of really great stuff, just no tornadoes on what was probably the most photogenic year out there. And I want you to focus on this particular motto, which is comparison is the thief of joy. This is often attributed to Theodore Roosevelt. However, he never said this. People say Mark Twain. He never said that. No one actually knows where this expression came from. But as we talk today about some pretty tough stuff, comparison being the thief of joy is one of the things I want you to concentrate on. So for example, last year I got this in New Mexico on a severe thunderstorm. Then this really beautiful sunset when we were out chasing, just a regular set of severe thunderstorms. And then this incredible thing at Palo Pinto, amazing sombrero supercell with wildflowers in profusion. This is what I got. And you know what? I'm really happy with that. I feel very content. And so but I also thought that we also needed to look really cool too. So I got together with my group. We're so metal. So I actually created a couple album covers for an album we'll never sing. But I think we look pretty badass, and I think you'll agree with that. I can't see because there's light. I'm assuming all of you are nodding appreciatively. So I get it. The reason I show you this is because I think this is a very common culture to get caught up in how good I am and how important my photos are compared to everyone else's. And it leads to a different cycle, and we're going to talk about that a lot today. So we're going to talk about things that get a little bit heavy. I want this to be a safe space. I want you to know that when I'm talking up here, I'm not talking about anyone specifically, okay? So a lot of you are going to go, oh, you're probably targeting extreme chasers. I am not. What we're going to talk about today is tough, but it will also be fun. But let me start with the darkness, okay? The reason why we're talking, and according to the study from 2024, is that substance abuse is not only an epidemic. 1 in 6 people in the U.S. population older than 12 suffers from some form of addiction. And that's a pretty heady number. If we just think about that in here, that's this table, and that table, and that table, and that table. It's and I'm not sure if I'm right on that, but anyway, the point is it's extraordinarily common. And why that's important is that suicidal ideation is increasing, and this is scary. 5.5% of all U.S. adults have had serious plans for suicide in the past year. So 1 out of 20. These are staggering. Only about 1% attempt suicide, but these are pretty grim numbers. And we know from within the chasing community that suicide has taken many of us too soon. So it's a very big deal, but the biggest statistic of all, in those with addiction, suicide attempts increased to between 15.8 to 50% or more. Now that's a lifetime. But the fact of the matter is, addiction, which we'll talk about the word addiction in just a moment, carries an incredibly high penalty. And some of the things that count as addiction are important. The most common one is alcohol. Marijuana has actually got a good number 2. Then caffeine and nicotine. Now, nicotine addiction is not considered as problematic in life, but it actually costs you a lot of money. And as my daughter said, she's not going to date anyone who has to have flavored air, which I thought was which is great. So you can't date my daughter, and that would have been that true beside what she said. This is from this study here. And so what we're going to talk about now, I'm just kidding. She makes her own decisions. She's 18. She gets to do what she wants. But I liked her comment. Addiction is deadly. And so the DSM-5 is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. You've probably heard of it. Before it was the DSM-4, logically. And the DSM-5 is an attempt to categorize mental illness, which is a very common problem that we experience in this country. And I really appreciated Edgar O'Neill's talk yesterday from the heart about vulnerability and the ability to talk about what's going on with us emotionally. The DSM-5 goes a step further, and it basically classifies things into newer categories that are there's less stigma. So we've often talked about addiction. Addiction. It carries a very negative stigma. Let me tell you right now that anybody who is an addict is a victim of something they cannot control. They are not choosing to be an addict. No one wakes up and says, today would be a really good day to get hooked on cocaine. It starts subtly and then it builds. And unfortunately, it's part of the disease process. We'll talk about that disease process. But they wanted to change the wording to use disorder. Okay, so now it's alcohol use disorder, substance use disorder. Now, because of that, I get to do the coolest thing ever, which is what we're going to talk about today is storm chasing addiction or storm chase use disorder, SCUD. Yeah, that's right. Now, this is normally where I'd say I'm not a doctor, but I am a doctor, but I'm going to tell you that SCUD does not exist in the DSM-5 yet. But we're going to talk about parallel disorders that meet this. So when we talk about SCUD, what we're talking about is something very similar to gambling disorder, which has now been reframed as something called behavioral addiction. And I know I just told you, I said what I said. We don't say addiction, but here it is. It's in the DSM-5 as addiction. Would you call it a behavioral use disorder or BUD? No, you wouldn't, and you'd be ashamed if you did. But this behavioral addiction doesn't just include gambling, although that is the only one that has been formally recognized by the American Psychiatric Society. There is also extreme sport addiction. So mountain climbers, people who do, diving, caving, those sorts of things are all likely to fall under this sort of disorder similar to gambling. So we're going to call that behavioral addiction. And so to that extent, in my mind, and again, this is not an official diagnosis, but bear with me, you'll see the parallels. I think SCUD is actually a form of behavioral addiction. So SCUD is not FOMO. So let me explain the difference between SCUD and FOMO. So fear of missing out is a very normal reaction to something you want to participate in and can't. The most benign thing is somebody's having a good time and you're not, and you want to be having a good time, and that's fear of missing out. In storm chasing, we experience this all the time. When I used to live in Florida, I'd fly out for 2 weeks every year, and because of my schedule, it had to be those 2 weeks. So it was very normal that I would gift the Midwest chasers with all these incredible tornadoes, and then I would land so that I could apply sunscreen for 2 weeks so that when I left, you could have tornadoes again, and that was just the way it is. So of course I'm going to be upset and disappointed. Those are all normal emotions, and that's fine. That is not what we're talking about today. And I want you to be open-minded and not defensive as we go through a lot of this, okay? So SCUD is pathological, and we'll talk about that pathology in many details. So if it follows as behavioral addiction, if we're going to call SCUD behavioral addiction, behavioral addicts have a high rate of substance use disorder, 28 to 50%. The most common kind probably in our group is caffeine addiction. So greater than 800 milligrams of caffeine a day is actually considered toxic. That is approximately 3 cappuccinos, a couple Monster drinks. So that's a form, not the one we're talking about. We're talking about alcohol and marijuana, a lot of meth, fentanyl. Let me tell you, fentanyl's in everything. When I got dressed this morning, I was covered in fentanyl. Who knows where it's coming from? It's actually coming in from everywhere. It's in everything. And there is an incredible risk of this. So if you have SCUD, which we'll talk about whether you do or not in a little bit, understand that it increases the risk of cross-addiction. The other thing that's very interesting about getting addicts sober is that if they are smoking or imbibing of any nicotine products at all, their chances of being sober at a year drop to less than 10%. So smoking and vaping actually make it very difficult to get free of any form of addiction. So it's not just benign stuff. Now, if you become attached to a substance use disorder, you are 4 to 7? I can't read my own writing. I didn't write it, actually. I typed it. Otherwise, I have really amazing writing, don't you think? 4 to 7 times higher risk than the general population. So this is not benign. This is really happening, and we probably know people in here who may meet this disorder. All right, these are from those studies there. So stop me if this sounds familiar. I'm going to first talk about behavioral addiction, okay? So behavioral addiction looks like this. Again, we're thinking gamblers, big risk people, huge risk, excitement, monetary gain. Now, monetary gain is not as big with SCUD, in my mind, but it is sensation seeking, mastery, identity, awe, being seen as somebody, very, very similar sort of drive. And so why this matters is that both of these involve powerful enforcement mechanisms. They basically rewire your brain. And we see these demonstrable changes, which I'm going to show you in the next 2 slides. But the first part is dopamine, which is, as we know, the adrenaline high that we get, floods the brain. And repeated doses of dopamine have a very detrimental effect over a period of time. One of them is that the brain doesn't like to be flooded with anything. So just like if you live and in your backyard keeps flooding, eventually you're going to build a dam. Well, the same thing happens in the brain. If it's continuously flooded with dopamine, it will actually build a dam to make it very difficult to get the same high from that dopamine, okay? Now, why is that important? Well, dopamine leads to pleasure. And if you are constantly flooding the brain with pleasure, eventually you are going to need a hell of a lot more dopamine to get the same high. And what happens is actual brain damage. So we're going to look at what are called SPECT images, and it's not important that you know how to interpret them, but I showed you there in the frontal lobes is where this is all going on. These SPECT images show what happens over time. So basically, if we look, and this is from this study here, if we look at a comparison subject, which is somebody who's not having addiction, what you see is that normal activity is really enhanced in certain areas of the brain. But if you have an addict, and in this case, I think it's meth, meth. What happens is if you look at their brains during their normal function, this area of the brain, the pleasure centers, is markedly diminished. So we talk about people who get high, but the reality is the opposite. This is an example of attenuation. And what happens is now this poor guy needs, just to feel normal, more meth. And that's the process that addiction happens. People are not choosing this, okay? There should be no stigma around this. Addiction is a disease that tells you you don't have a disease. All right. when this happens and you have these downregulation of dopamine receptors, you develop this phenomenon called anticipation and craving. Now, we all get anticipation. I am guilty as anyone else to hitting refresh on the SBC day one, NATOcast, HRR, and then I'm going to hand draw my map, which looks remarkably like all of those other things I just did, but I'm going to try and get that forecast. I'm getting excited. So that's anticipation. The problem is anticipation is almost as good and sometimes more potent than the real thing. If any of you have ever gone on a first date, you know what I'm talking about. The anticipation is like, this is going to rock my, as far as I can remember. It's been a long time, 33 years. But I will tell you that, what I remember is I'd get excited about that sort of thing, and then the reality would set in and it's not as good. Well, that will lead to a thing called craving. Now, I'm going to change the term craving for you briefly to really try and change your mind on what that word means. When you and I crave something, like I crave a steak, it means I want a steak. But in addiction, craving is entirely different. So this is a busy slide, so bear with me. We're going to go through it a little bit at a time. So we talked about dopamine surging pre-meditation. Craving in the context of addiction is distraction and preoccupation. Great example of this is hitting the refresh button on the HRR and SPC day one. That is a great example of preoccupation. Now, what does preoccupation look like in addiction? To the exclusion of any other activities. That's what it looks like. To the exclusion of important activities. So, for example, my daughter is inconveniently both graduating from high school and college because she's in a high school that allows you to graduate with an associate's degree. She has 2 separate graduations this May. I'll give you the dates at the end so you can see the Tube Fest that would be like a repeat of Dodge City. I am going to be sitting there in the seat with my phone off because I'm going to be there for them. But if you find yourself at important events hitting refresh, maybe you do have craving. It's a preoccupation to the exclusion of other activities. Now, Alcoholics Anonymous has a lot to say about this. It's very interesting. Craving is so powerful that people are unable to remember the negative consequences of their prior drink. In other words, they got a DUI. Great story. A friend of mine, unfortunately, suffered from severe alcohol use disorder, got a DUI, up in Northeast Colorado, and had to go serve some jail time. After the ruling, he had 30 days to present to jail. So guess what he decided to do on the way there? He drank. And he got another DUI. Now, you may laugh at this as being ridiculous, and he laughs at it now because he's in recovery. But that's a pretty good example of what the hell is wrong with you. So I want you to think about it in a storm chasing context. How many times do we, despite bad decision making, make the same bad decision again and again and again? In Alcoholics Anonymous, they talk about obsession is the mindset that leads to the first drink, and it's the first drink that gets you drunk. This is a very interesting twist of things. It means that no human power can stop you after you've had that first drink from just hitting a ton more and not being able to stop. That's the key issue. So if you're obsessed about radar when you're not even chasing, if you're obsessed about getting all the live feeds when you're not even chasing and you're not paying attention to your life, if it's a down day and you want to watch, go for it. There's nothing wrong with that. But I want you to just sort of take some personal inventory. And again, don't be threatened by this. This doesn't mean that you have SCUD, okay? And then that leads to escalation and tolerance. So escalation and tolerance in gambling is larger bets, bigger risk. Who hasn't seen this before? Going closer, getting more and more insane footage, going farther, or for God's sake, doing something like this and going, yeah, we're so back. The hype train in storm chasing is truly insane. Epic and other words. They're hard to keep up with. If this turns you on, And it says Broyles. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. No, Broyles is great. He's a good guy. He's a wonderful guy. He really is. And he has a good website out now. You should see it. But it's a bad joke. But if this is the stuff that you're going to end up doing, there may be an example of tolerance. All right. Identity fusion is another characteristic here. Now, identity fusion is important to understand because it basically is identifying as something as opposed to you. The reason I opened my talk telling you about me is because all of those things I shared about are me. That's part of who I am, but it's not who I am. So identity entrenchment increases resistance to stopping. So here are some questions. If I stop chasing today, who would I be? What if I couldn't chase storms? What will people think of me if I don't catch the biggest storm or have the biggest success? If these are rattling around in your brain, you may be having a hard time de-identifying yourself. Now, this is best described, identity fusion is best described in political circles, but I want you to take a moment. They often ask people about their political affiliation, which is not part of this talk, but what you see is there's self and there's group. And then over time, what happens is you can no longer identify self from group. And I would posit that a lot of us are here at C, which is fine. But I think the more you move to D and E, the more likely it is that you are unable to imagine yourself being anything but. That identity fusion is very dangerous because you lose the willpower to be you, to fail. Humans fail all the time in spectacular ways. And that's great. But we have a zero tolerance for failure. Edgar talked about that, how everyone is chastising people on social media. We have a zero tolerance for failure in this country, partly because it's gotten to the point where that is what's really extreme. So if you are increasingly thinking of yourself only as a chaser, you are getting identity fusion, which is a sign that you may have some use disorder stuff. All right, so loss of self-esteem. Now, all of us have some degree of self-esteem issues. That's built in who we are. I will reference back when I began with the, comparison is the thief of joy comment that I made earlier, right? Everyone else has got better stuff than I do. That's not true. So you have to find in your way to be okay with who you are and what you've got. Otherwise, you forget what blessing life is. But the problem again, this is in behavioral addiction, is that it perpetuates the need to do more, okay? I always have to do more than I did before. I have to win more. And even though I doubt myself, I'm not going to change my behavior, right? Einstein said it, and many others probably have said it to some extent or another, doing the same thing, expecting different results. If I chase really recklessly and I didn't get anything, so I chase even more recklessly, we'll talk about that cycle in a moment. Now, big wins, unfortunately, lead to the perception of importance. So if anybody believes that great example of this. Denver Broncos fan, and I'm not shy on it, okay? Stidham was not ready, all right? I just want you to know. And hey, shut up, wait, hang on, hold, please. I also was rooting for the Bills. And I will tell you that I think the Bills are great, but they unfortunately are in the same damn conference. So definitely don't like New England. Screw them. Anyway, but... All right. And I think, and especially it's nice that Brady's not whining anymore there. But anyway, I wear my Broncos shirt on football days because there's part of me that believes one leads to the other. I wear the Broncos shirt, they win. It's like a contract. They don't know it, but that's the thing, right? We have these little things that we do. But what happens is we reroute our neurons to believe that what we believe is true. I'm not going to be very political for a moment, but I am going to make a comment. There is some people in the current administration who, when they say something, they actually believe it's true because they said it, and they act as if what they said was not only true, but that everyone else's truth is the same. Again, I don't care which side of the political spectrum you're on, you know that's happening. What happens, though, is if you continue to believe that what you say is true. In other words, I am going to do this behavior because it works every single time. That is a change in perception, and it actually gets tied to your self-esteem. Because if you fail, it's because your system failed, right? So this is nuts, right? Anybody who actually keeps Arnett dots up on their goddamn radar is crazy. If you are guilty of this, know that right now, I know we've been talking about a safe space. No, you're nuts. You are absolutely nuts. No, I'm dead serious here. And I'll tell you why you're nuts, okay? Because I've got objective evidence that you're nuts. And the reason that I say this is, who cares where these other people are? Who cares? How many chases do I go on? I'm like, I like that storm over there. That little storm looks really, really good. And all of a sudden you see a fleet of people going in the opposite direction, often in your lane. But, so the inability to trust yourself and experience things yourself. This is, again, that identity fusion that occurs and a loss of self-esteem. So it's never enough. That's another common thing. So I've heard that at this conference, and I get it. Sometimes we say that jokingly. Like, I could really use a supercell to take the edge off right now. Right? Like afterwards, smoke if you got them, right? I mean, but that, All right. So I know this is going to be ironic. This is, believe it or not, this is actually a gambling addiction term, and it's called chasing behavior. Dead serious. It's where a gambler tries to make up for losses through revenge gambling, which leads to more losses, rinse and repeat. Good article on this. As a chaser, well, now I have to go after that marginal setup, which I put on the other page because I missed. Chaser, I can't stop chasing a storm until I get to see a tube. Chasing after dark. High precipitation cell. Not that I've ever done that kind of thing. We all do it a little bit. The question is, are you doing it consistently? All right, so that brings us to negative consequences, which is our favorite topic. So in behavioral addiction, that looks like financial losses, legal issues, impaired risk assessment, so unable to realize that when you lost $100 on that last bet, you don't bet another $100, right? So impaired risk assessment, restlessness, irritability, and discontentment. In addiction circles, this is called the RIDS. I'm restless because I can't chase. I'm irritable because I can't chase. I'm discontented. Loss of relationships. So if you have a gambling addiction, and you have a solid marriage, those two do not go together because it's impairing your relationships. Increasing consequences with increasing conviction of successes. This is the really great mindset. Again, no one chooses this. This is how the mind gets rewired. The idea that this time is going to be different. This time, when I shoot myself up with heroin, it's going to be better than ever. Borrowing or demanding money. Yeah, but in contrast, here's SCUD. So it's basically the exact same thing. I've seen a lot of GoFundMes. Please don't fund people who are trying to do this for chasing. Please do not. Point blank. I don't look down on people who ask for that money, but please don't. Because that actually is a sign of addiction. So when you start asking people to just fork over money. Now, that's not the same thing as people who do this for a living and they want you to have a membership and they give you something in return. That's a different type of relationship. And there's lots of chasers who are chasing professionally now who do create a product that you're partaking in, and when you pay, you're helping them do that. That's fine. I'm talking about, I really need to raise money so I can chase for the next 2 weeks. And if you haven't seen one of these yet, just wait. It happens. But again, impaired risk assessment. I am invincible. I can tell you that there is nothing that will humble you more than a puddle of water. So I chase fairly responsibly most of the time. I am human. But I will also tell you that I was on I-40 east of Amarillo on my way into Oklahoma when, on a tornadic storm day where I was going literally 35 miles an hour, I hit a puddle of water that went a little too long. My wheels went off the edge as I hydroplaned, and I rolled my car. This was at a reasonable speed for the conditions. It just so happens it was an unreasonable stretch of highway. So I rolled my car. That happens. But then there's the extremes. And so we've seen people die because they can't read a stop sign, because they think they're on a rural road and it doesn't matter how fast they go. Let me briefly comment that this risk-taking behavior, one of the things that really gets me upset is when people speed through small towns. We are going over their roads that they pay taxes on. Now, I, as part of my day job, save lives. We, as a chaser community, do not. We provide reports which may save lives, but we do not save lives directly, which means there's no excuse to run a red light. There is zero excuse. And I want that behavior called out because it's not okay. Accidents happen, we get amped, I get that. But when you see people doing that, there is a possibility that you're dealing with somebody who's very addicted because they don't have the ability to look at their risk assessment. It is so damn frustrating in Southeast Colorado when they narrow things down to one lane with a light. There's no people flagging you. You're just waiting for that light to change, and there hasn't been a single car in the other direction that you want to blow it. I get it. I get it. You don't get to go. Okay? Breaking the law is an example of impaired risk assessment. All right. So do I have SCUD? Well, I don't know. I mean, do you have something else? A different menu I could borrow or something else like this? I don't know. I think I'll take the beef. All right, so now's your chance to learn whether you have SCUD or not. We've gone through several domains. So I want you to keep track on your own. I'm going to riff off the DSM-5 criteria for behavioral addiction, okay, which again is closest to gambling. There's nine things. So if you need to keep track of, this is the proper use of AI, by the way. This is exactly why you use AI. None of that other stuff. All right. First one is tolerance. Needing to go farther, longer, take more risks to feel okay with chasing. Tolerance. I can't feel satisfied with the chase I just had because I need to get the next one. Next one, withdrawal. If I'm not storm chasing, I become restless or irritable, jittery, or I obsess. Again, remember that discussion about preoccupation, the inability to do what you are supposed to be doing at that moment because all you want to do is look at radar. That is not the same thing as catching glimpses of radar in between doing things you need to do. That's totally fine. Having YouTube on in the background, totally fine. But if you are missing things, like say work or like your children, that may be a sign that you're developing withdrawal. Loss of control. And this is really a key component of all forms of addiction. Repeatedly chasing despite negative consequences. This can include repeated vehicle damage, loss of insurance, financial issues. Who has the money to pay for all these windshields that I've been seeing? I don't know if you know this, but even though your insurance policy tells you that the windshield replacement is free, and that it doesn't count against you, it 100% counts against you. Every single time you use that windshield benefit, it is going to increase your rates, and not immediately and very subtly, but it's going to happen, and it can get very, very expensive and can also disqualify you for future auto insurance. So don't believe that just because you have insurance that gives you a free windshield that you're getting a free windshield. Someone's got to pay, and that's going to be you. But if this is happening repeatedly, where you are exposing your vehicle despite not having the finances to fix it, or you're not doing oil changes or all these other things, that's a loss of control. Preoccupation, unable to worry about your success versus others. We've talked about that. Chasing to deal with stress. Now, let me explain. When I chase, that is very low stress for me up until like I'm on the wrong storm. Because people say, what's it like chasing storms? And I always tell them, you know how when you go to the grocery store and you get in line and it's the wrong line? That's me. That's what storm chasing is like. Everyone else is getting through with no problem. I've got grandmas buying one, okay? But ultimately, I love to chase because it gives me pleasure. But if I'm doing it as the sole activity that provides relief from stress, that's a problem. All right, chasing behavior, which is not chasing storms, it's chasing behavior on storms to catch up, to notch your belt, etc. Deception. Now, Edgar mentioned this in his talk yesterday. Lying to others about where you are. Picking up the phone and telling your boss you're sick and you're 600 miles away, okay? Consistently, not just one-off, right? Or you're not going to tell people about things. Also, overdraft, financial mismanagement is a form of deception, right? If you are taking out lots of credit cards to chase, that is a form of deception because that is not money that you have. You're banking that you're going to have it someday, and that is like the gamblers. Or jeopardized relationships, breakups, divorces, loss of friends, loss of self-esteem, running into trouble at work. Those are all there. All right, now, the last one, which we mentioned, the GoFundMes. So borrowing money to chase, probably not a good plan. If you're borrowing money to chase, you probably shouldn't be chasing. I know that sounds unpopular at a chasing conference, but really, you've got to think about this. We have to be adults. All right, so here's the scoring. So again, this is not, SCUD doesn't exist. I made it up, but I love that you loved it. So basically, if you counted your score from the last slide, and also I find this really funny, that's not a heart. I realize it says, I heart mild SCUD. It's not actually it. The score is actually supposed to mean less than 3, but you get the idea. If you only have a few of those, probably you have very mild disease. But if you have anything higher than that, you actually probably have a problem. And if you are being honest with yourself, then you may have a problem. Now, remember what I said earlier, one of the reasons this is so important is that having any form of a behavioral addiction increases your likelihood of cross-addiction, picking up another substance to deal with the addiction. By the way, people who tell you that people drink or do drugs to cope, that's actually not true. The reason that people do the drugs they do, quite simply, is the brain tells them this feels good. You can claim, oh, I drink because my wife's a pain in the ass. Nope. You drink because your brain thinks this feels really good. Okay? Oh, he probably just does lines of heroin to take the edge off from his, amphetamines. Okay, maybe. But anyway, if you have these symptoms, cross-addiction, suicidal ideation, those are very real things. So is it possible to moderate rather than go to extremes? Like lip and eye remover, maybe a little extreme? I mean, that might help. I don't know. Kind of hot, really. I'm just kidding. Possibly if you have a heart, no. Possibly if your score is less than 3, but I will tell you that if you scored a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you probably have a problem. And it may not just be in storm chasing, it's probably going to be cross-addiction of some kind. All right. Suicide, very big risk. I don't want to see any more suicides in this community. I really don't. Yeah. So I realize for some of you, you're like, yeah, whatever. That sounds pretty extreme, and I get that. I do. But here's the real facts. You're not that powerful. And here's what I mean by that. Number one, you can't get someone drunk. That's something that they talk about in AA a lot. You can't get someone drunk. In other words, you can't make somebody become an addict. That's their own destiny. And conversely, you can't get them sober. Meaning that if there are people who are addicts who are storm chasing addicts with SCUD or whatever addiction they have, you're not going to be able to get them sober. Interventions don't work. They have to reach the conclusion that they have a problem because you're not that powerful, bottom line. And for addictions of all kinds, and this isn't from personal experience, mind you, but this is what I'm told. Addiction is like sex with a gorilla. You're not done till the gorilla says you are. Okay? You've learned a lot. First with the duck, and now with the gorilla. You're not done till the gorilla says you are, and the reason is that that person has to reach that conclusion themselves. Addiction, at the end of the day, can be diagnosed by someone like me, but the person who is most important to diagnose it is the person themselves. They have to be sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. So be supportive, have boundaries, even ones you chase. But if somebody in your life has an addiction problem, have a boundary, but you can't get them sober. Okay? You don't need to fix anyone, even yourself, but you can ask for help. And that is really one of the most important things in the world. And I will tell you, you're worth it. In this current era where likes and clicks and follows and all this other stuff is happening, it is easy to forget how important you are. It's easy to self-denigrate. And it's easy to believe that the next chase is going to make you a freaking hero. It's not. You're already as good as you're going to be. It's great. Stick with it. Be yourself. You don't have to be famous. I'm not, and you guys are sitting here at 9 in the morning on a Saturday listening to me. So there's hope for you. So here are some resources. SAMHSA is actually part of a social administration through the government. 1-800-662-HELP. You can find substance and mental health resources there for free and anonymously. Okay, you don't even have to tell people that. You don't even have to dial *67 for those who remember. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 1-800-273-8255. This is open 24/7, is a free service, and they are phenomenal. They're phenomenal people. Self-help strategies for dealing with any form of addiction will not work. You cannot fix an injured brain, and I showed you pictures earlier with an injured brain. It just doesn't happen. Because here's the bottom line. If we could do it by willpower alone and cure ourselves of addiction, then we wouldn't have addicts. Addiction, by its very nature, tells you you don't have a disease. And so you can't do it alone. But you have to, decide with the gorilla when that is. And I will tell you, recovery is freaking beautiful. Because you know what? I would much rather see somebody who's gone through recovery and found themselves, maybe a path to a power greater than themselves, a chance to connect with something more than themselves. That's a beautiful, beautiful process. Bad news is the hurt's got to come first. I'm sorry for those of you who may be hurting in the audience, and I hope you get past that. And I am not telling you not to chase and enjoy chasing. I want you just to be mindful. Just so you know, on that scoring system, I forgot to mention, you have to have, for severe or moderate, 4 of those things in the past 12 months. So if you can only keep it at 3 of those things, when the new year comes, you can pick up that 4th one for free. All right, thank you. So I'm actually going to not take questions publicly because I think that may be weird. Am I an addict? Could I have a problem? Do you know the name of the gorilla? That kind of thing. And I appreciate that very much. I will be outside for you to talk to. Again, I'm an introvert, so you need to approach me. Do so very cautiously, on hands and knees, with a worshipful stance, and I'll recognize that you're ready to talk to me. I promise I don't bite often. Thank you, everybody. Keep enjoying the summit.
was a great time, right, guys? Give them another round of applause.
Woo! All right. You know we have amazing vendors here, right? You know we have amazing giveaways here. So we want to talk a little bit about Radar Scope, and we have some more fun giveaways. We have 4 of them, but I'm going to give you the mic so you can talk a little bit about it.
Hi, I'm Mike Wolfenbarger. I lead the Radar Scope team. Spun the product out of OU in 2008. I got up here yesterday briefly and just said thanks for letting us be here. Thanks to you guys for hosting the event. Thanks to all of you for being customers and supporters over the years. I asked yesterday how many people have Radar Scope on their phone. Raise your hand. We got a lot of those. Thank you. You guys keep us in business and allow us to keep making the product better. There's an old Walt Disney quote once. He said, "We don't make movies to make money. We make money so that we get to make more movies." That's why we do Radar Scope. So when you subscribe to our product, we use it to make the product better. We're people who have been in the weather business since the 90s or the early 2000s, and we do this to help people stay safe and stay informed. One of the big reasons why we do it and why we're here is we feel like training and situational awareness and knowledge is power, and it keeps you safe, and it helps you keep other people safe. And one of the things that I think has been great about this conference the last 2 years is how many students we have here and how many young people we have here. So we've got a couple of, and Tim Vasquez, he's one of the OG storm chasers. He's been doing this since the 1980s. He's been part of the Norman weather community for decades, and he's written some great books. One of these is, and he donated these. I was going to buy this, and he said, no, I'm going to donate it. This is the Weather Radar Handbook. It's a great way to learn how to interpret weather data, radar data. What I want to do is find the youngest attendee here today. So it might not be here. I don't know. Do we have any young folks in here?
How'd you feel over there, man?
Good. We got anybody younger than 10? We got a 10-year-old right here. All right, come up here. We're going to give you a book. Your job is to learn everything in that. Yeah, okay. All right, we got any middle school students here? Middle school or high school? We got a middle schooler out there? I can't see because there's shining lights in my eyes. Right here? Who's down here? Who wants a copy of the Storm Chaser Handbook? Give middle school student. Come on. All right, let's come on up. Oh, give it to one of the students. All right. So Tim's selling books over here, so I'm going to put in a plug for him because he was kind enough to donate those. Tim is one of the, like I said, one of the OG storm chasers. He's been chasing since the 80s. He's been part of the Norman, Oklahoma weather community for almost that long, I think. He also may be the only person here who is actually trained, certified to operate an X-Red radar. So he's a good guy to learn from. We were going to do some other giveaways, so we're going to ask a couple of questions. This is a trivia thing. When did Radar Scope launch on the App Store, the iPhone App Store? Whoever gets closest to the date gets a hat or a tumbler, you can pick. Green shirt. 2008, May? Okay, let's see if he gets closer. Okay. 2012, okay. It was August of 2008. You're the closest. So you can have a shirt or a tumbler. Take your pick. I mean, not a shirt, a hat or a tumbler, not a shirt. I didn't bring any shirts, sorry. All right, one more question. What else can we ask? Something about Radar Scope. Ross, give me a question.
Oh, man.
I'm out of questions.
What is the newest platform we support?
Okay, what is the most recent platform on which Radar Scope launched? We're on like 19 different kinds of things, but what's the most recent platform we launched on?
Windows.
Windows, all right. Give this man a tumbler. A handsome reusable tumbler right there. All right. Listen, we're here not just to drum up business, but we're here because you guys are the choir that we get to come and preach to and enjoy being with. We are here to support you. We are here to support this event because we think this is a great event. We think this is a great event in part because they focus on training and safety, and that's super important to us. The whole point of Radar Scope is to promote situational awareness and help people make better decisions, keep themselves safe, and help people protect lives and property. So we're just thankful to be part of the event. Thanks for having us. Come by the booth if you haven't yet.
Woo! Awesome. Great round of applause. Radar scope is amazing. And right now we actually have a 15-minute break. And then Josh Morgerman is on the stage and you don't want to miss it. So go to all the vendor booths, check out all the things. Again, we have our 50-50 raffle, so please do that. You can go to the registration desk. You can buy 1 ticket for $5, 5 tickets for $20. Make sure you do that. Last year, it was like $1,000. So it's a lot of money. It's a great opportunity. It goes to an awesome cause, helps our scholarships, so definitely do that. We love you guys.
Make sure you're back for Josh. You don't want to miss it.
Yeah.